So what are some points of evaluation that we can use for Singapore's situation, or how exactly has globalization affected Singapore? Some specific judgment points. So first of all, Singapore has no raw materials, right? We have very few factors of production. We always hear people saying that our only natural resource is human resource, which is true, and we do have a pathetic amount of raw materials. And the second point is that we have a very small domestic market due to our relatively small population size. So these 2 points tell us that without globalization, it is impossible for Singapore to have economic growth at all. So therefore, globalization is so important to Singapore. And because there's no way we can turn the tide and say no globalization, we need the sound economic policies to mitigate the negative effects of globalization. For example, we need social safety nets to help vulnerable workers, right? And we also need the economic policy to maintain our competitiveness so that we can continue to ride the waves of globalization. So, but a problem for Singapore is that we are too reliant on the external market. Therefore, we are very vulnerable to external supply shocks and demand shocks. For example, the oil prices that tend to be very volatile. And for example, the previous case of Indonesia banning sand exports to Singapore, and that really affected our construction industry. So from these we can tell that we really have the need to diversify our external economy. We need to sign more free trade agreements with all possible countries. So that's why we're now really looking at the Middle East, Africa, Latin America to establish these positive trade relations. And even if we do not necessarily have these the trade relations may not necessarily be explainable by comparative advantage in this case, but having more FTAs will also have a gateway function. So what do I mean by the gateway function? Which is that when a country has free access to a lot of the markets in the world, it will tend to attract more FDI. Why? Because these firms would want to make use of the free access that the country has to other markets in the world to export its own goods. So even if it just chooses to offshore like a fraction of the production process in Singapore or just some packaging process, it will increase the income that is earned by Singapore. So that's what I mean by the gateway function.